To encapsulate the career of Lee Goldberg in a few short paragraphs would be a nearly impossible task. Then again, publishing your first novel at 19 is a nearly impossible task, but Goldberg managed to do just that with 357 Vigilante. It is nearly impossible to break into television by submitting an unsolicited episode to an established show, but Goldberg managed that with a script for Spencer for Hire. And it is nearly impossible to balance a full-time career in television and remain a regular on the New York Times bestseller list, but Goldberg continues to accomplish that. It is nearly impossible to make Baywatch an Emmy-worthy drama. Well, even Lee Goldberg has his limits. But his body of work, which spans from fiction to nonfiction, from novels to television, is as impressive as any you will find. His latest thriller in the popular Ian Ludlow series, Fake Truth, hit bookshelves in April. But in truly Goldberg fashion, he has another release, Bone Canyon, due in January. About the only thing that seems impossible for Lee Goldberg is slowing down.
Hi, my name's Lee Goldberg, and you should be watching The Crew Reviews, even though they don't review a damn thing. It's still great. Start watching now.
All right, our guest tonight has put the pro in prolific, and he's put the duct in productive. I don't know what that means, but we want to welcome Lee Goldberg to the show.
That's the first time anyone has ever called me a duct. That's a first. I'm going to use that as a blurb.
Now he's a
Next book.
Sean Cameron.
Lee, usually our guests have a project they're promoting when they come on our show, but in your case, you seem to have something new, something recent, something upcoming at damn near every moment. Your most recent Ian Ludlow novel, Fake Truth, third in that series, was published in April, and Bone Canyon, the follow-up to January's brilliant Lost Hills, comes out in 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
But since Fake Truth is the most recent release, let's start with that one.
Okay.
Can you tell us what Ian has gotten himself and his counterpart Margot into?
Well, Ian is a guy like me, built like me, who writes thrillers and ends up in real thriller situations.
Wow.
And this time he's discovered that the real world is kind of caught up to his thrillers, and he's got writer's block. He can't come up with anything more exciting than what's going on in the real world, which frankly a lot of us are dealing with right now.
Stranger than fiction.
And in researching a new story, stumbles into a gigantic plot to topple the United States with fake news to a new degree, fake reality. I don't want to give it all away, but so much of what I came up with for this book has since come true. So people have been telling me, oh, you're such a lazy writer. You just read the newspaper and rip that off. No, it hadn't happened yet when I wrote it.
Yeah.
But it's hard to keep up with the world today. The craziest stuff you can come up with isn't as crazy as what's happening out there.
So true.
How did that make you feel, though, when your fake truth came truth?
It was very unsettling. I mean, with my previous books, it wasn't happening as quickly. While I was writing Fake Truth, I was actually getting emails from my editor going, hey, I just saw this article in the newspaper. It's straight out of your book you haven't written yet. It's like, oh, God, I have to replot now. And I kept stopping and replotting my book. And finally, I realized I would never get my book done if I kept stopping and replotting every time something fictional I came up with happened. So I just rolled with it and wrote an author's note in my book saying, believe it or not, everything in this book was fictional when I wrote it. I know it's not now, but that's the way it is when you write thrillers. But at least I think my attitude towards what's going on is different and unique. My character approaches the world from a writer's point of view, from plot and character. And so with my thrillers, the Ian Ludlow thrillers, I'm trying to write a really great thriller, but at the same time satirize it, and at the same time show you how the sausage is made. And it's a delicate balance I'm not sure I always pull off, but it's a lot of fun for me.
Yeah,
that's a lot of fun for us.
Yeah, no kidding.
I like to say, here's the cliche, or here's the trope. Here's why it's silly. And now I'm going to undermine it, but also fulfill it at the same time and give you all the pleasure you expect from that trope.
Cool.
And you infuse a lot of humor into your stories. And your latest Ian Ludlow thriller, Fake Truth, it's no exception. The pairing of Ian and Margot, they work so well, and their interactions are filled with moments of hilarity. You make it look easy, but is there a fine line for including humor in thrillers? And how does a writer know when there's too much slapstick going on?
you have to have a very clear sense of the tone you want to strike. And I didn't want these books to be Get Smart or The Pink Panther or Austin Powers. I wanted them to be thrillers. To be honest with you, the first book, True Fiction, was meant to be a standalone. I had no intention of ever writing a sequel. I just thought it would be funny to have a guy like me having to live what he writes about and what would happen, and dealing with the conflict between reality and fiction and the expectations he set up about the way the world should work, and his discovery that it doesn't work that way. And what would happen if an ordinary guy with no special training finds himself in these situations? Because all these heroes are always ex-Navy SEALs or ex-spies or ER doctors or something wonderful. They aren't schlubs like me. They have no special training. So in the tone I want to strike in the series, in the subsequent books, I want to deliver the thrills, but I still don't want to lose that Ian is a guy just like you, the reader. What if you were in this situation? Right. And the way Ian succeeds is not through physical prowess, it's through an exceptional imagination. He brings his skills for storytelling to the real world and somehow makes the real world play along. Perhaps because the world now has become fiction, and fiction's become reality, and they're so intertwined, it's hard to separate them.
Yeah, for sure.
In that way, it's almost perfect. I mean, even though some of the stuff is being stole from, or is echoing what's in your book, to me it has more resonance now, because there is a realism to the surreal qualities of your books that's kind of frightening.
It's scary stuff, but at the same time, I want to give people an escape. I want it to be fun. I don't think I could write. I imagine we'll talk about this later. I can't write anything without humor in it, because I think even in the worst moments of our lives, there's always some humor, at least in my life.
Absolutely.
So I find books that don't have humor to be unrealistic. I also think humor humanizes characters and makes them real. So if you're laughing with the character instead of at the character, you're invested in the character.
Very true.
I think that's what pulls my readers into the story. Even when I do some outlandish things with the plots in the Ian Ludlow books, I try still to ground the Ian Ludlow books in reality. In some ways, it's a lesson I learned when I was writing both the TV show Monk and the Monk books. Monk had the potential to be Inspector Clouseau or Maxwell Smart, an absurd cartoon character.
Yeah.
But the reason he wasn't is every story was grounded in some sort of emotional or sentimental reality from Monk that always reminded you of the essential sadness that was at the core of his character. So while you were laughing, he never became a cartoon character.
Right.
And that's a delicate balance. So there are many times in writing the Ian Ludlow books where I'll write a funny line or a funny situation and realize it's too funny. Or we're laughing at the characters, not with the characters. The jokes aren't coming out of fear or conflict or weakness or vulnerability. They're coming out of being funny and clever. And so it's difficult. It's not, I want the books to look effortless, but there's a lot of effort that goes into it.
Oh yeah, we know that.
We know exactly how that is. Most writers find success after 30. Let's just face it.
So I have a ways to go.
So, me too. How is it you published your first novel, 357 Vigilante, which spawned 3 sequels and rights sold to New World Pictures while you were a UCLA student? That just blows my mind.
Well, I've been writing since I was a child. I mean, nursery school, grade school. I don't have it here, but when I was in kindergarten, I think, I wrote, you remember those big line sheets of paper that were super long?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
I wrote, I want to tell stories when I grow up. I'm doing exactly what I wanted to do when I was a kid, what I dreamed of doing. I haven't changed. I've gotten older, but I'm still doing the same stuff I was doing when I was 8. So I was writing novels all through my childhood. I wrote rip-offs of The Saint called The Perfect Sinner. I wrote about a guy from the future who was born in an underwater sperm bank. Why it was underwater or how you made deposits, I have no idea. I just thought it was cool. I had all these things. I was writing all these novels that for myself to entertain my friends and family. And when I got to UCLA, I had a journalism professor named Louis Perdue. And he wrote these big, bulky conspiracy thrillers like Robert Ludlum was writing. I used to call them prepositional phrase books because the first paragraph was always a prepositional. The men in the car, across the street, in the center of the biggest city in the United States. We're in the midst of one prepositional phrase after another. But he wrote these thrillers and we became friends, and he would show me his manuscripts and I would criticize them. I don't find this sex scene realistic, even though I hadn't had sex. I don't find this right. We'd have a big argument. And one day his publisher came to him and asked him if he would write a men's action adventure novel, sort of the male equivalent of the Harlequin romance. They used to be everywhere. They had titles like The Destroyer, the Executioner, the Terminator, the Immolator, the Defecator, the Drooler. They all had ER, OR at the end, and a guy with an enormous gun on the cover, and a woman with big hooters and explosions.
Yeah.
And you found them at finer 7-Elevens and gas stations and military bases around the country. And Lou said he wasn't hungry enough, desperate enough, or stupid enough to write one of these books. But he knew somebody who was. And, he recommended me. So I wrote an outline and a sample chapter for 357 Vigilante by Ian Ludlow. So I'd be on the shelf right next to Robert Ludlum, the best-selling author in America at the time.
Good thinking.
And his covers were boring. They were hammers and sickles and, they had national capitals and things. I'd have hooters and explosions. And
they'll sell.
For Ian Fleming. So readers would go, Ian Ludlow, I think I read something by him. It wasn't bad. My book had the good fortune of coming out the same week that Bernard Goetz blew away some muggers on a New York subway train.
Oh, wow.
Vigilantes were hot. New World Pictures bought the movie rights, hired me and my friend William Rabkin to write the script, and my movie and television screenwriting career was born. And so I owe my whole career to 357 Vigilante. And to remind myself of my humble beginnings, I'm going to move my giant head right now. Ooh. There's the painted cover for the Vigilante books right behind me. All that changed for each book was the lower image to reflect whatever was happening in that particular book.
That's crazy.
But years later, I tracked the artist down and bought the actual painting that was used for the 4 Vigilante covers. And now, visual effect, cool. I'm covering it again.
Pretty cool. So you were 19?
19. And I wrote the books in class. And I don't know if you remember lecture classes, but you'd be in a giant lecture hall. You'd have people on either side of you. And sometimes if you kind of wandered off mentally, whatever, and you missed what the professor said, you might look at the notes of the person next to you just to see what you missed.
Right.
Well, I remember one particular class vividly. I was writing this rape scene for my Vigilante book. I had 2 women on either side of me. And they looked over my notes to see what they missed. And after the break, I had 2 empty seats on either side of me. Oh. I wanted to hold up the side and say, I have a contract. I'm not a crazy person imagining molesting women during class. Honest.
Dating just went out the window.
It's my job. No. Writing's the job, not the other. Writing.
I remember with the Vigilante book, the first one, I turned it in. And I had aspirations about being a serious author. And I had read all these men's action adventure novels as preparation, and I was going to write the literary men's action adventure novel.
Oh, yeah.
So my hero was avenging the murder of his father, and he becomes a vigilante to do that. But all this blood and guts takes a deep emotional toll with him. And when he gets home to his girlfriend, he can't get it up. And he's impotent. And because every time he starts to make love, he sees the head he just blew off that afternoon. And,
that kills the mood.
Yeah. So my editor wrote back to me and said, "Are you out of your mind? These are men's action adventure novels. Not only is he hard as a rock, he's having amazing sex."
Yeah.
So I was really pissed. So I wrote the most outrageous sex scenes you can imagine. He would just glance at a woman and she'd faint from multiple orgasms. I had couplings that were physically and anatomically impossible, that defied gravity. I just wrote the most ridiculous sex scenes I could imagine. I sent the book in. I hear back from my editor, "We read the new scenes, Lee." And I knew it was coming next. You're dropped. We're hiring a real writer. What my editor said was, not only were they hot, they were real. And I was so miserably depressed because if that was real sex, I was the worst lover on planet Earth. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I could look at a woman all day long. She would never have multiple orgasms just from my powerful erotic glance. I mean, oh God. So it was devastating for me. But I owe my career to those books. And to remind myself of who I was when I was a teenager and what my dreams were, when I'm swearing about the horrible unfairness of a network note or something about my books, I will look at that cover and remind myself how lucky I am to be doing what I'm doing every day. I'm the luckiest guy I know.
Lee, it seems like that was the jumping off point into becoming a television writer. Do you think that happens though? Getting into television, if you aren't hired to write the script, the screenplay for
my path into television was so unusual and something you could not mimic. It was, I wrote the Vigilante movie. The movie never got made. I thought my screenwriting career was over, and I went into journalism. And I was covering the entertainment industry for Newsweek, the LA Times Syndicate, Television Age, a whole bunch of other magazines. And Bill Rabkin and I, we were best friends in college, and he had taken screenwriting classes and I hadn't. He and I wrote a spec episode of Spencer for Hire. No one asked us to do it. No one paid us to do it. We just did it to show we could write an hour-long teleplay. And our agent, who was actually not an agent, she was a secretary at William Morris that was in the television department. She was a secretary for an agent, and she had aspirations to be an agent herself. And I sent the script to her, and she stupidly sent it to Spencer for Hire. You never send a spec to the show you're speccing because they will only see all the mistakes you've made. What you're supposed to do is write a great CSI spec and send it to Law and Order. So the producers of Law and Order read your CSI spec and say, oh, this sounds like a great episode of CSI. It really captures the voice of the show and the way they tell stories. If he can do that for CSI, then maybe he can do that for me here at Law and Order. That's the purpose of a spec. He sent it to Spencer for Hire. Well, a year later, we heard nothing. I was working at this industry trade publication that covers the entertainment industry, and I get a call from the executive producer of Spencer. I go, oh, I'm so glad you called. I was waiting for your call. I'm going through all my notes trying to figure out why the hell I called him, and I'm just treading water. I'm so glad you called. I was looking forward to your call. I've been needing to talk to you for this story. And he said, I don't know why you called me, but the reason I'm calling you is we'd like to shoot your episode next week, if that's okay with you.
Okay.
There's only one answer for that.
Sure. And then he said, do you have any more ideas? And I went, 9. He went, 9, like 9 ideas?
You're
or
not German, right?
German for no. I went, no. 9 ideas. I've got 9 powerhouse ideas. I hadn't seen the show in a year. He said, great, we'll come in Monday. We'd like to hear them. Well, I quit my job at the trade publication. Spencer hired us to write 3 more scripts.
Awesome.
And the TV writing career was born.
Wow.
Now, as we're jumping ahead now many years, as a showrunner myself, I ran Diagnosis Murder for many years and other series. I gave a lot of people their first break, a lot of writers their first break. And it was almost always based on a spec script. Someone would send a spec into me, and it'd be someone with no produced credits, but I would read that spec and say, I like this woman's voice. I like the way she sees stories. I like that she understands the 4-act structure and how to reiterate the franchise in every scene, but also brings her own character into it, her own point of view. And that's how I hired so many writers over the course of my television career, off a spec episode, but also a script of their own. I wanted to see that they could write for television, they could build a bookcase in someone else's home, but I also wanted to see how they build their own bookcase. So I would ask for a spec, an episodic spec, but I would also ask for a spec feature or pilot that the writer wrote that reflects entirely their own point of view of storytelling and character and the world, just to see how their mind works.
Yeah.
So you're one of the few writers who work regularly in both television and with books. So what are the different demands of each? And do you have trouble going back and forth, getting in the proper headspace to write television versus to write novels?
They are very different forms of storytelling, entirely different.
Yeah.
In a television script, you're essentially writing a blueprint for other people to go do their work, for a director to direct, for a set designer to build sets, for a wardrobe person to create wardrobe, for actors to find their characters. So many people are going to be looking at that document for their job and what they bring to it. So it's a working document. It's not something necessarily made to be read and enjoyed like a book, though it has to serve that purpose too. It's essentially a blueprint. But because everything in television has to be either visualized or spoken or it's not there, stories are told in an entirely different way. Everything has to be revealed through dialogue or action, or it doesn't happen. Whereas with a book, you can get inside somebody's head, you can add all sorts of background, you can drive the story forward in a lot of different ways, and your book, you're the writer, director, wardrobe person, you're creating the whole world. It's just you. So you have a lot more decisions to make, and to my mind, it's a lot harder. I can write a 2-hour TV movie in 2 weeks, or an episode in just a few days. It takes me 5 months to write a novel.
Right.
It's a lot more work. But there's also a lot of other unique aspects to writing for television. When you write for television, you're writing a story that has to be told in 44 minutes with 6 to 8 breaks, depending on the network, and told within the 4-act structure. And the 4-act structure is something that was created to squeeze commercials into TV shows. Actually, it was from radio, when radio had commercials in the middle of shows. So it's a totally fake, manufactured form of storytelling that has become embedded in all of us. We instinctively expect the 4-act structure, even in shows that don't have commercials. If you watch shows on HBO where there are no commercials, they're still told the 4-act structure because that's what we expect, but also because the shows might eventually show up on commercial television, and they want there to be natural breaks for the commercials to be shoved in. But also in television, because there's such limited dramatic real estate, screen time, every scene has to move the story forward or reveal character. There can be nothing extraneous. Every line of dialogue has to reveal character or move the story forward. Plus, since anybody can change the channel at any moment, you have to make each scene, I'm using big words and stupid words, but emblematic of the show. Or to use a phrase we use in television, reiterate the franchise, which I'll explain in a minute. So when you turn on, for even just a second, a scene from a TV show, oh, I'm watching Monk, or I'm watching Law and Order.
Right.
Even if you don't see the stars of the show in there, because they have their own unique type of storytelling and visuals.
Yeah.
So when I mention franchise, TV shows are like fast food restaurants. There are a million shows about cops solving crimes in New York or LA.
Right.
But each show tells that story differently, in the same way that there are a million fast food restaurants that serve hamburgers. But there's a difference between a Carl's Jr. hamburger and a Big Mac and a Wendy's hamburger and a Jack in the Box hamburger.
Right.
And that's what the franchise is. It's setting your show apart from the others. So when you write a television script, there's so much more that goes into writing the story than you initially suspect.
Right.
Plus, the story has to be true to the franchise. Everybody told the show. I hit my camera. Everybody told the Chandra Levy story. Remember the intern who disappeared?
Yeah, right before 9/11.
Homicide did, Law and Order did, CSI did, Monk did. But each show told it from their unique prism, their unique viewpoint, from within their franchise. So whenever you're coming up with stories, you have to think about all that for television. But also, one more thing, your budget. I've only got X number of dollars every episode. That means I can only afford 3 days on our standing sets and 4 days on location. And each location has to be within 30 minutes of our soundstage. All those things impact how you tell stories. So it's much more difficult in other ways than just sitting down and writing a book, because I can do whatever I want in a book. I don't worry about budget. I don't worry about airtime. I don't worry about whether the actors are available. I don't worry about reiterating my franchise or if someone's going to turn the channel.
Right.
So it's two very different ways of writing. When I was doing Monk, I was writing the TV show by day and the books by night. And it was a complete shift. I mean, it was jarring to shift from one to the other. Even though it was the same character, it's telling stories in an entirely different way.
Right.
Did I just bore the hell out of all of you?
No.
No way, dude.
And you actually answered my follow-up. I was going to ask you if you had to focus on screenwriting and you had to focus on novels, or you did bounce back and forth, but you just answered that with your Monk question. So.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I'll say this. Writing books is a very solitary experience. I do it right here where you see me. I mean, you're looking at my computer screen where I do my writing. It's right here. And it's just me. If I have a story problem, I have to carry it alone. With television, you break stories, you plot stories in a writer's room. You're with 7 or 8 really clever writers, all trying to write the best possible story. So if you're having a bad day, or if there's something you're trying to get to and you just can't quite get to it, another writer in the room might know the way to do it.
Yeah.
And it's so energizing. I'm a better writer in a writer's room than I am by myself, because they won't let you get away with cliche. Every one of us has our own personal cliches, our own habits we get into, where if a scene is difficult or if the path is hard, we have easy tricks we fall back on, or our old standbys we fall back on. And the reader or viewer may not be aware of them, but other writers are, other novelists or other screenwriters. And in a writer's room and a TV show, they won't let you get away with that crap. And it's great to have that
kind of an
that push. And the social aspect of it.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, you can go to a next office and say, Bob, I'm having trouble with this scene. Here's what I'm trying to do. You have any ideas? And they'll help you. Or you know, it's whereas here by myself, I don't show people rough drafts. I don't show people anything. I mean, it's all me.
Right.
Unless I'm writing a book on spec, and then I do have several close friends, like True Fiction I wrote on spec. And I showed a bunch of my friends the book before I sent it out to publishers, and got great feedback.
Yeah. You had quick success, early success, you know, as a teenager, starting off with the Jury series, the Vigilante books, and that was the mid to later 80s. And then you shifted and wrote some nonfiction titles kind of in the early to mid 90s, and then a couple of Charlie Willis titles. But then you seemingly reappeared in fiction with this massive tidal wave of releases starting in the early 2000s. So what sparked this tsunami of fiction writing? Just, I mean, not that you weren't already completely established, but it was just like the tsunami that just came out of almost nowhere.
It happened. A lot of it's financially driven. I'm a professional writer. I write for a living.
Right.
So if I don't make money writing, my family doesn't eat. So I can't always pick and choose what I want to write. I have to pay the bills.
Yeah.
So when I was writing books as a teenager and a young man, I didn't have the obligations I have now. And once I got into television and was married with a family, television pays so much better than books.
Yeah.
So every time I wanted to write a book, my agent would say, why bother? You can write another episode of The New Adventures of Flipper. It'll pay you more than any of your books. And he was right, you know. So it's hard to justify financially writing another book. So I wrote the Charlie Willis books while I was still a freelance writer. But then once I got actively involved in TV, it just didn't make financial sense to write books. But I could still diddle around with these nonfiction books about unsold pilots and stuff, because it's just something I do while I was on location in my hotel room. It was not, and there was no money in it. It was just something I did because I was interested in the television business.
Right.
It was just to entertain myself. But then I think it was around 1998 or 99, somewhere in there, I got a call. Diagnosis Murder had been canceled, and I didn't have a job on a show yet. And I got a call from Penguin Putnam offering me a 3-book deal to write Diagnosis Murder novels.
Okay.
Out of the blue. Because they had huge success with Murder, She Wrote. And said, we need another Murder, She Wrote. And they looked at Diagnosis Murder, and the Diagnosis Murder was a big hit, but then they discovered, oh my God, the executive producer writes books, and they're good. So they just sent me a contract. And I looked at the contract, and I said, no, not interested.
Sweet.
I've already written 100 episodes of Diagnosis Murder. I got no more Diagnosis Murder stories to tell. 48 hours later, I went, are you out of your fucking mind? Pardon me, America.
That's okay.
You nuts? This is offered a 3-book deal. Of course you could write more Diagnosis Murder. So I called them and said, it was a horrible mistake. The Lee Goldberg that was sent that
I was drunk.
offer was on antibiotics and antihistamines. It was not himself. This Lee Goldberg would be glad to take the deal. So I wrote those 3 Diagnosis Murder books, and the pay was crap. It was just so nice to be published again. And I wrote them while I was, as it happened, doing a show that was shot on location in Toronto. So I spent a lot of time away from home. So it filled time.
Yeah.
And then I started working on Monk. And Andy Breckman, the creator of Monk, was approached to write novels based on Monk. He said, I'm not interested, but if Lee wants to do it.
Offered up
Monk.
again.
For a period there, I was writing 4 books a year.
Oh my God.
A new book every 90 days. I would write a Diagnosis Murder in 90 days, finish it on Friday, take the weekend off, and start writing a Monk on Monday. Monk book. While I was doing, as it turned out, this series in Toronto, and then later, it's a long story, but the short version is I was doing a lot of shows overseas in Europe. So I had the time because I was away from my family and in hotel rooms, but it was killing me.
Yeah, no kidding.
Killing me.
No kidding.
And the Monk books were doing better and better. In fact, they started as paperback originals and did so well that they went to hardcover.
Wow.
Amazing.
So, and my Diagnosis Murder books were staying pretty flat because, frankly, most of the audience was dying. My audience was 80 years old, and I wasn't growing the audience. In fact, the
reality.
audience was like packing my books with them in their coffins to read in the afterlife. So I stopped writing Diagnosis Murder. I wrote the finale I always had in mind, and I stayed with the show until the last season. And then I wrote 2 Monk books a year and discovered that was my sweet spot, that writing 2 books a year while working in television was absolutely sustainable. And
for you,
that's what I've done. And it's been great because I've had ups and downs. I've had periods where I've been so busy with TV, the books were a burden. And then times when there was no TV and it was great having the books. Now I'm at an age, now that you mentioned how old I was and I wrote my books and it was in the 80s, where I've kind of aged out of network television. There is ageism in TV. And I'm well aware where even though I have a series on Hallmark called Mystery 101, I'm still very active in television. I'm not day-to-day working on a weekly series anymore. So the balance between my TV writing and my book writing is absolutely perfect. And I get hired now and then to write feature scripts. So it's the perfect balance. I've discovered I can write 2 books a year and write a few scripts, and it's fine. It's just the right amount of work.
Man.
Lee, your brother's a writer.
Yes.
Your sister's a writer. Your mother was a feature writer for multiple publications. Your father, we were talking about this before, was a television anchorman.
Well, we talked about that off the air, and I was naked at the time. I hope you're not running that.
Don't stand up. Don't stand up, please.
This interview.
So was I, but that was weird. So I put clothes on. Lee, it's safe to say writing and television, the gene, if there is such a thing, is coded into your DNA. But did you ever, at any point, I know you said you were writing as a child, but did you ever have at any point desired to be something other than a writer? Maybe like,
No.
I don't know.
Nope.
Fireman or anything?
Always wanted to be a writer.
Always.
Wow.
Never a question. And my family, it's all different kinds of writing. My father was a television anchorman on KPIX in San Francisco. And he talked like this all the time, whether he was on the air or just having a casual conversation at home. Hi, Lee. How was school today? Dad, can you please stop talking odd? I'm not talking odd at all. And when he laughed like this. She never knew if he really found you amusing or not. He was just a weird guy. My mom was the Paris Hilton of her day.
Oh, no.
She went to parties all the time. My father was this very successful anchorman. My mom was gorgeous, and she just went to parties. And actually, my parents got divorced because my mom wanted to explore her sexuality. She was named one of the 10 sexiest women in San Francisco, and so she was going to parties all the time. So the Oakland Tribune, I think, was first. They said, since you're going to parties all the time, why not write about them for us?
Ooh.
It's like, okay. And my mom started going to parties for a living. That was her job. She turned her hobby into her job.
How can we get one of those gigs?
She had a column for the Contra Costa Times, which was in the East Bay of San Francisco, and it was put in multiple newspapers owned by the same publisher. And your party meant nothing if my mom didn't write about it.
Wow.
And so I saw that you could make a living as a writer, but no one was doing the kind of writing I was doing. No one was writing fiction or writing for television. And this is actually kind of interesting. My mom, slept around a lot. I can say this now because she's dead, but she slept around a lot. And she was once in Santa Barbara with a boyfriend, and she got fogged in down there and couldn't make it back to file her column. So she called me up and said, Lee, you have got to sneak into the newspaper at midnight tonight. Get my reporter's notebook out of my drawer. Don't let anyone see you. You have to write my column for me. All the notes are there. And so I went in and I wrote the column in my mom's voice.
How old were you?
Oh, I was intermediate school, I think.
Jeez.
High school, somewhere in there.
So how did you get in?
I'm sorry?
How did you get into the newspaper?
Oh, it wasn't locked. And I was going with my mom all the time, and I would use the typewriters to write my novels and stuff. I was a familiar face in the newspaper offices. No one had a second glance at me being there.
Yeah.
So, and also I wrote book reviews for the book section, the mystery section. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah,
Wow.
So anyway, I got all these great free mystery novels from the newspaper, and no one knew I was 13 years old or whatever I was, 15. Anyway, I wrote this column for my mom, and when she got back, I decided to rub her nose in it. I said, "Oh, your job's not so hard. Anybody with a grade school education could do what you do." And my mom went, "You're right." So she would go on vacation and leave a box of notebooks for me and say, "Here are my columns for the next week."
Oh, my God.
And I would write my mom's columns for a week. And I was so mad. I was being taken advantage of. She was using me. I wasn't getting paid. And
Where's my paycheck?
I realized later, and I've told her this, she was alive when I was able to tell her this, that she gave me a fantastic gift. I learned how to write on deadline.
Mm-hmm.
I learned how to write in someone else's voice.
Wow.
Which is a key
TV
talent you need in television. Because when you're hired to write on a TV show, your job is to write just like the showrunner writes. You're going to tell stories, but you got to do it in his or her voice. And you have to have the voices of the characters. But it also meant I could write in a woman's voice. I wrote in my mama's voice. So she taught me under pressure how to basically I honed the key skill that I need to do what I'm doing today. So I was getting education, didn't even know it.
That's crazy.
Like, I guess that explains why Lisa Gardner and Meg Gardner and many others have talked about how Eve Ronan is one of the most realistic women characters. So now we know how. Now we know where you got your training to write women characters.
I've been surrounded by strong women my whole life. My mom was a single mother raising 4 kids. I have 2 sisters. I have a wife and daughter. No one lets me get away with crap.
Oh, good.
And because I'm the oldest of 4 children, I raised 3 kids before I had kids. So I'm
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of appreciation for single mothers. I also have a lot of appreciation for women, and writing in a woman's voice was not hard for me. I know right now there's a lot of pushback of men writing women, but there's also a long history of women writing men.
Sure.
Agatha Christie writing Hercule Poirot, and Val McDermott writes about men. A lot of authors write about the opposite sex.
It'd be really dull if we only could write our gender. We'd have a bunch of all male books and all female books, and
Right.
that's a whole other area of controversy I don't want to stick my big toe into. But now you get in trouble if you write about an ethnicity or a sexuality or a nationality that you don't actually represent yourself.
Right.
Sure.
We look at the blowback, the woman from American Dirt. God, I'm pointing this way because her book's on my shelf over there. I haven't read it yet, but it can go to an extreme.
Right.
For sure. Well, I mentioned Eve Ronin. I want to get back to your current career. As much as I'm enjoying these past stories, Lost Hills came out in January. It's a freaking great book. It was well received, particularly by other authors who absolutely loved it and raved about it. But it's a little bit grittier in tone than the Ludlow book. Was that a conscious choice, or was that just a natural residue of the story?
It was an absolute conscious choice. I had a big fear about being typecast writing only a certain kind of book.
Right.
I don't want to sound like I'm egotistical or full of myself, but I'm primarily known for my sense of humor, I think, for writing funny stuff. Even with the books I wrote with Janet Ivanovich, they're funny. And that could be a real trap. And I want a career more like Michael Connelly's, where you can write a whole bunch of different things. You're not trapped in one. Now, arguably, you could say he's trapped in the crime novel, but I want to be able to write a bunch of stuff. And True Fiction was a big success, and I had a contract to write more of them, but I was afraid, oh God, after the hugely best-selling books I wrote with Janet, and now with True Fiction, I'm going to be typecast as lighthearted action-adventure. I want to write something gritty. I want to write something tough. I want to write a police procedural. And I had an idea for one. And it wasn't Lost Hills. It wasn't Eve Ronin.
Okay.
And I went to a homicide investigators training conference that some friends of mine got me into. They're not open to civilians.
Ooh, nice.
And it's where homicide detectives have to, recertify.
Right.
Every year they have to do 24 hours of training just to stay up on the latest techniques, latest laws and stuff. And these seminars are designed to keep homicide detectives on the cutting edge.
Yeah.
So I got into one of these, and they were presenting cases. And there was a case presented as an example of why it's necessary for a homicide detective to approach each case as if they've never investigated a homicide before. To shrug off
perfect for you
common sense or homicide common sense, because if in this particular case you followed the common sense, you never would have solved it. And as that case was presented, I immediately saw the book. I mean, I saw the character.
Nice.
I thought, oh, this is great. But how do you have a character? If you have to shrug off everything you know about being a cop, how can I create a character who's in this position who doesn't have all that experience? And so while I was in the class, I could feel the book growing. And that night I couldn't sleep. I just had, the whole book came to me. I saw immediately how to move this case to Los Angeles, how to fictionalize it. I saw the character, and I wanted to write in a woman's voice because I'm sick and tired, as much as I enjoy them, of all these middle-aged male characters with a dark past, the serial killer case that killed their family, or the time they spent in Nam, or whatever. They all have the same dark shadow, and they're alcoholics or addicts of some other kind, and they're not appreciated by their bosses, and there's all these cliches I just wanted to completely avoid. But then I had another issue, which is if I write a police procedural and I set it in Los Angeles, I'm battling Michael Connelly and Joseph Wambaugh and James Elroy and all these amazing writers who've come before me, but also all the shows that have been shot here. What can I do differently? Well, they say write what you know. I live in Calabasas, which is in a unique little bubble within the center of Los Angeles that's within the jurisdiction of Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. It's essentially an island in urban Los Angeles, surrounded by other law enforcement jurisdictions. And yet within this island, there is every walk of life, rural, rich, poor, it's celebrities, politicians, the homeless. It was a great, fertile ground. So I decided to set my story in the Lost Hills jurisdiction in Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, and to write about a woman. I wrote the Monk books first person from the point of view of Monk's assistant, and I missed that voice. So I decided to write a completely different kind of character, a character who is completely new at what she does, doesn't have any experience, and makes monstrously huge mistakes. Because I'm also sick of the homicide investigator who's absolutely freaking brilliant at his job, who has solved 1 million cases, and still everyone doubts him and undermines him. Right. And again, I love Rebus and I love Bosch, but you'd think people would know they're great by now. You know, when Harry Bosch says the killer is George, it's George. He's always right. Let's stop undermining him. So I decided I wanted to get away from that. I want to have a character who makes huge mistakes and isn't always right. Isn't a deductive genius, but does have a unique skill, a unique ability to observe things.
Yeah.
And to be frank, I wanted humor.
Yeah.
I love police procedurals. Nobody laughs. There's no jokes. I know from personal experience, the worst possible situations in your life, there's humor.
Right.
And I didn't want to have gross cop humor either. I wanted character humor. Mm-hmm. So I also decided I wanted to be invisible. I wanted my authorial voice to not exist. I learned this from Janet Ivanovich, believe it or not. She said that if you have a clever line, put it in a character's mouth. Don't write anything clever in the description or in the prose.
Oh, yeah,
You're
sure.
just calling attention to the writing and to you. But when you think you're a clever, witty, wonderful person like I do, that's really hard. So I purposely, with the exception of the first paragraph of the book, took my authorial voice out of it. Just the facts man. I wanted the writing to become invisible and to use television techniques to let the dialogue and the action move the story forward. I paced it like a television show. Huh. If the scene didn't have conflict, if the scene didn't reveal character or further the plot, I cut it. And if I wrote something clever, if I couldn't find a way to put it in a character's mouth, I cut it. It was the hardest book I've ever written.
Wow.
And it's also the most successful book, critically and financially, that I've ever written. So, and also creatively, I think in many ways, it's been the most, for me, most enriching and challenging. And I love writing the Eve Ronan books. The second book's already written. I'm about to start the third. And those books have made me a better writer. They've given me a fresh perspective on writing crime fiction and forced me to raise my game and forced me to look at crime fiction in a different way. And I'm still attending homicide investigators training conferences and picking up really great stuff to use in these books. Not to show off. I think there's a tendency when writers do research to want to show the reader, hey, look at all the research I did. So I'm going to give you tons of it. All it takes is one line, one little detail that adds the verisimilitude, and that's all you need. If that's all you get from 3 weeks of research, that one line, it's worthwhile.
Right. Well, speaking of success, Lee Goldberg has won a boatload of awards and accolades.
I have. So, where the hell are they?
Wow.
I've seen your bookshelves. I've seen them.
Yeah, we've seen that. So
accolades from my mom don't count. You know.
Well, okay. Then let me ask you this question: of the ones that you're aware of, which one has the most meaning for you?
Which accolade has the most meaning? I'm looking up them up here. The officer-friendly certificate I got in kindergarten. I still remember how exciting that was when the police officer said that I had the makings of a great police officer, and I got the officer-friendly badge and officer-friendly award. That was a big one. And also, you can see them in the background here. One up above there is my Kentucky Colonel certificate, but the one below is one of my Edgar Award nominations. And that was a big moment to get the Edgar Award nomination, to get the praise from my peers for a television episode I wrote. That was really good.
Yeah. Do you think it's the peers that the peer recognition has a lot more meaning for you than say just an industry in general?
I don't know. I'll let you know after I win an Emmy. how I feel. Actually, the Emmy's a bigger award too. So
That's true.
I don't know. I mean,
People's Choice
to be
Award.
honest with you, I'm less interested in awards. This is gonna sound pompous, but I'm not so interested in awards. I'm interested in providing for my family. So to me, I don't care whether I'm on the New York Times bestseller list. I don't care if I get an award. As long as I can continue to write and pay for my mortgage and support my family, then I'm the happiest, luckiest guy in the world. That's my reward. I don't need other accolades than that. The accolade for me is the next book contract. I get to keep writing.
There you go.
That doesn't sound pompous at all. I've said since I was a kid that if I could make a middle-class income doing what I love, writing, then that'd be great. Riches are, fantastic, but just to be able to write and just to continue to write.
I would say the key to my career being successful is that I have not just written books or just written TV shows, because I've had big ups and big downs in both industries. I've had shows canceled and not worked for months. I've had book deals dropped and not been able to sell a book. By and large, books don't pay, unless you reach a certain level, books don't pay well enough to support you. They just don't.
Right.
Television does, but television is not consistent.
Right.
So I remember when we were on strike and I was writing books, all my friends were like, how can I get into that book business? They're only interested in books when TV was letting them down, not while TV was going strong for them. Also, I've taught. I also have spent a lot of time in Europe as a television consultant, helping studios and networks get TV shows off the ground. I have a publishing company, Brash Books. I've tried not to put all of my eggs in one basket. I've tried to spread my interest in writing and publishing out over a wide area so that I have multiple revenue streams. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, what I'm doing is art, but it's also very much a business.
Sure.
And I think the most successful writers today realize that and embrace the business aspect and understand it and write accordingly.
Yeah.
I don't just write the book, send it off, and forget about it. I'm very involved in contract negotiations. I'm very involved in the marketing publicity campaigns for my books. Because I come from a journalism background, because my mom for a while was a publicist, because I've done television shows and worked with marketing and publicity machines, I have a real clear idea of what I expect and what I want and what I want to achieve. I'm very, very hands-on when it comes to the covers of my books. I'm not a difficult person. You have to ask my editors. I'm not difficult, but I am involved. And if I have an opinion, it's not just based on whim. I'll say, here's why I have this opinion. Here's the experience I had with other covers or other books.
Yeah.
Lee, taking a step back, I've heard you say that in high school you got a graduate school education in writing by calling up writing producers and novelists that you admired and interviewing them.
Yes.
How does a kid in high school acquire the skills and courage to do that?
Well, first of all, you have to master your dad's voice. Hi, this is Lee Goldberg, calling from the Contra Costa Times. I remember, I wanted to know how to write James Bond movies.
Sure.
So I was writing book reviews for the Contra Costa Times. I called up Richard Maybaum, who wrote the Bond movies. Hi, this is Lee Goldberg with the Contra Costa Times. And I'd like to talk to you about the writing of your latest James Bond film, For Your Eyes Only. Sure.
Like that?
When can we talk?
Just like that.
Right now. Like, what? It's like, so I do these phone interviews, speaking of which my phone is ringing now for no reason, but I would do these phoners and these interviews, and the Contra Costa Times was stunned. How'd you get Stephen Bochco? I called him. So, and writers rarely get called. It's always the actors who are getting all the interviews.
Exactly.
I called every novelist and television writer I admired, and I interviewed them. And I asked them all the questions I was interested in, and then I would write an article about it for the Contra Costa Times or the San Francisco Chronicle. And the Contra Costa Times knew I was a teenager, but the Chronicle didn't. And then I put myself through college writing articles. I had financial aid and some grants and some scholarships, but I also wrote. And it was great. That's how I supported myself.
Right.
But the reason I mentioned the writing for college is so I was interviewing all these writer producers throughout high school, and I would interview Stephen J. Cannell all the time. He had a lot of shows on the air.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know how I happened to mention it, because I went to Los Angeles to go to school, and I think he had a show, Greatest American Hero, at the time.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I don't know how I mentioned I was in LA. He said, "You're in LA? Oh, I'd love to meet you after all these years. Come on down to the studio." I went, oh, shit. He's going to discover I'm a pimply-faced 18-year-old kid, and I'm done.
That's awesome.
So I went down to his office at Samuel Goldwyn, and sure enough, when I walked through the door, you could see the look of horror on his face. Oh, my God, I've been scammed. So I asked him the toughest question I had in my, what's the word, quiver?
Yeah, sure.
I asked him about the financing of his show, how he was pulling it off. And it just kind of floored him, and he answered the question. All right, jump forward 5 or 6 years later. Steve and I are friends. I've worked for him on Hunter and Cobra. He was an actor on Diagnosis Murder for me.
Awesome.
We were buddies.
Yeah.
And I sat down with him and said, I mean to ask you this question. When I was 18 years old and I walked in your office at Samuel Goldwyn, did you think that I was getting scammed? You're going to ask me how to sell a script? Yes. But then you cut my balls off and fed me with that asshole question about the financing, which, by the way, I lied to you. We had nothing. It was everything I thought. It was true. I still remember one of my greatest moments. We became friends after that. I still continue to interview him. And I was working for this television trade publication when I sold that Spencer for Hire script. And then I sold, make a long story short, I got a job as a story editor on Hunter. I'm walking down the corridor at Stephen J. Cannell Productions, and I bump into Steve. He says, "Lee, oh my God, do we have an interview I forgot about?" I went, No. Well, what are you doing here? "I work for you, Steve." "What?" "I'm a story editor on Hunter." And he got this look, and he gave me a hug.
Oh, that's awesome.
He said, "I had no idea you wrote scripts." I said, "Because it would have been a violation of my journalistic ethics." But 6 months ago, I sold a spec script to Spencer. I quit my job at Electronic Media, and I've been writing scripts. And anyway, he was so happy for me. He was so sweet.
Awesome.
He just gave me a hug. But then, later on, years later, when I was working on Cobra, other writers there resented me because Steve and I had this close relationship.
Yeah.
So the showrunners I was working for didn't like that the guy below them was so close to the boss who had his name on the building.
Yeah.
I remember Steve used to come into my office and say, "Lee, I'm writing a book. Let me read you the first chapter." He'd read me the first chapter.
Man, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Lee, you have actually survived the main portion of the interview. Raise a glass to that, because that's
survived.
I'll have some of my homemade Diet Coke.
Yeah.
Some people have moonshine in their backyard and stills.
Yeah.
I have Coke Zero still.
Sounds very LA.
Sounds like a lawsuit.
So the lightning round, to give you a little hint at what it is, it's, our moms all told us, well, at least my mom told me, think before you speak. This is kind of
I haven't thought before I said a word the whole time.
Well, this is the portion of the show where you're invited not to think before you speak.
You've warmed up already.
Yes.
Let's do it.
I will ask 3 questions, and then my cohorts will as well. My first question: you have a couple of very entertaining nonfiction books, unsold television pilots, and the best TV shows that never were. So what's the best TV show that never was?
Oh, that's a tough one. Alan Alda, before he did MASH, did a pilot called Where's Everett, about a guy who finds an invisible alien baby on his doorstep.
Invisible.
You'd hear the crying, you'd hear, whatever, but no baby.
Oh, man.
Inexplicably, that show didn't sell. He should be glad, because
you got MASH.
There's another great one with Robert Vaughn called Dr. Franken, a modern retelling of Frankenstein, where he makes a monster out of the bits and pieces of dead people. But the Frankenstein monster is a touchy-feely Frankenstein monster. And he gets vibes from his pilfered body parts. So, like, his kidney will start acting up, and he'll go find the widow of the guy who had the kidney, and she's about to lose her farm to a big developer, and he'd help her with that.
Oh,
so,
man.
It was Frankenstein, you know.
His spleen.
Highway to Heaven. You know, I go on and on. There's a bunch of these. There's
It's so funny.
Samurai District Attorney, Joe Penny, as half Asian, half Caucasian district attorney by day, sword-wielding samurai warrior by night.
Is that Saturday Night Live?
No, it's real. It's real. In fact, if you go on YouTube, I did 2 television specials based on my book. The Best TV Shows That Never Were and The Greatest Shows You Never Saw. They're both up on YouTube, and I think both specials have clips from Samurai District Attorney.
Oh, I have to see that.
That's beautiful. I love it.
My second question, Fred Dreyer, David Hasselhoff, and Dick Van Dyke step into the ring. Who steps out and why?
Oh, Hasselhoff is dead right away. Dreyer would be the one who steps out. Dreyer is
he's a
giant
man.
guy.
Yeah, he was a big boy.
Giant guy.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're exceptionally prolific, as we discussed, and I imagine you have a constant stream of ideas in your head.
Oh God, I wish that was true.
No? Okay, so I was gonna say, pitch us a show right here. Pitch the crew a show,
Yep.
Pitch you a show.
or pitch the crew as a show.
Hold on, let me fix my hair. Hold on.
Hang on. A terrible weed whacker accident during the coronavirus.
Oh, yeah.
He cuts off his left hand.
Okay.
But through modern miracle of technology, he's given a new hand. But the hand takes him over. And pretty soon he's not a man anymore. He's a machine. Able to communicate with any electronic object within 30 feet. Printer problem? He can make it print. Phone? Laser cannon? If it's within 30 feet of the machine, he's part of it. He's
lasers.
So now, by day, he's a certified public accountant. But otherwise, he's a secret agent for a small government agency no one's ever heard of that works with uniquely gifted individuals to solve crimes beyond the scope of modern law enforcement.
Sold.
All done
Only
through
the late
Bluetooth.
Brandon Tartikoff were here.
Yeah. Well, come on. Think about reality for a second. I would love to have been in the pitch meeting. She's wild. She's wacky. She's a nun. And she flies.
Flies.
Yeah, she
Got it. Or he's an ex-cop with a dark secret. He's on a lonely stretch of road when he has a car accident. He's taken in by a mysterious stranger who nurses him back to health and gives him a car that talks. Together, he and his talking car fight crime for a super secret organization. Show ran 5 years.
I know.
Yeah,
So
I
the
know.
dumbest idea you can come up with could be tomorrow's next hit show.
All right, I'm next. My first question, and we've already talked about this in great detail, but which Baywatch character is modeled after you?
Sean Weatherly. Actually, there's a character modeled after me. I can't remember the character's name, but we had a lifeguard who was in his 60s or 70s, played by Monty Markham. And I love Monty Markham because he was the $7 million man.
Yeah.
And he also was the new Perry Mason. And I loved writing that character. And I used that character to make fun of Baywatch. So if you look at the old first season episodes of Baywatch, Monty Markham was always making fun of the show. He made fun of lifeguard, but in the course of being a straightforward character.
Right.
There's one episode where he's pondering all the history of the lifeguard rescue canister, or the unique architectural elements of the lifeguard tower or whatever. I loved for him. And
Now I want to go rewatch that just to see what you.
I just wrote it down.
Baywatch was the hardest show in the world to write for because, let's be honest, all they do is dive in the water and rescue people who are drowning. That's it. Yeah. That's all lifeguard does.
Okay, so who was the funniest staff writer that you've ever worked with on any of your shows?
Funniest staff writer?
Yeah.
Writer, you've been around, I suppose.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, well, this wouldn't be a staff writer, but
Okay.
hands down, without a doubt, the funniest person I've ever worked with anywhere is Michael Gleason, who created Remington Steele.
Okay.
He was my boss on a show called Murphy's Law with George Siegel.
Oh, I remember
He
that.
was the funniest guy. Oh, God, was he funny. And he lives in me every single day. In fact, he's lived in me in this interview we've done. Because he taught me how to pitch. And he taught me in many ways how to tell stories. And I remember when he and I were pitching, and the first time I pitched, I was like, okay, he's a private eye, and he was a cop, but then he got a horrible anal disease, and whatever it was. I had to leave the force because he couldn't crap anymore. Whatever. And Michael would say, more energy, Lee. You have to be excited about the show. So we pitched something else. I can't remember what it was. And he dives in the room and
Lost him.
Winner. Goldberg wins lightning round.
I love this show.
That is awesome.
Get him back.
I'm going to.
Get him back.
That's excitement, people. That's
Dude,
what happens when you're excited.
If you're going to be on the show, you got to be like Lee
that was
Goldberg.
the first
moment ever.
That was a first.
My favorite moment ever.
The best moment
You
of our
get
show
to use
of all
that.
time.
I approve of that.
Awesome.
So that's a first, but it underscores his point.
Oh,
The point
that's
of his
beautiful.
story was, great pitch, Lee, but can we have a little less Gleason? Pull it down. You don't need to dive on the floor, knock over the coffee table, and come up shooting. And I just demonstrated that in the midst of this interview.
No, we like Gleason. More of him.
More Gleason.
Yeah,
All right.
we're more Gleason type
My
of people.
last question is going to be this.
That wasn't your last question. I just shattered a $10,000 computer. That wasn't enough for you?
We're going to switch it up in edits, make that the outro. All right. Out of all the novels that you've produced, if only one of them could have been published and the rest never saw the light of day, which one would you choose?
Prior to Lost Tales coming out, which would probably be the one I'd choose right now,
Yeah.
I would have chosen Watch Me Die, also known as The Man with the Iron-On Badge. Until I wrote Lost Tales, that was my favorite book.
Oh,
And that was a book about a lowly security guard who gets the chance to be a private detective, but he learns everything he knows about being a private eye from watching Magnum P.I. and reading Spencer novels, and discovers the real world is nothing like that. And while I did play for the laughs, I also played the reality, which is in the real world, people aren't black and white villains.
Right.
You know,
right.
they don't wake up in the morning and go, whoa, I'm going to take over the world.
Yeah.
Steve Cannell actually taught me that. Steve Cannell, so when you're thinking about a villain, villains don't wake up in the morning and go, how can I be evil? They have kids, they have mortgages, they have hopes and desires and dreams. They're not all bad. They have things going on in their lives. And the thing about television is they're always, clearly bad guys, except until The Sopranos came along. They were turtleneck thugs from the syndicate. And
right.
that was what I did in Watch Me Die. I had a character who grew as a human being, but also discovered that the real world is different from what he thought it was. And that when you're knocked unconscious, it's not a nap. It's a concussion. You lose control of your sphincters. You can't just jump up and make love to a woman after being knocked unconscious when you got a load in your shorts and
change your pants.
Yeah. So that was a big book for me in a lot of ways.
Awesome. All right, Christopher, you're up.
Sure, Lee. I've seen several videos where you answer fans' questions about things in your office.
Yes.
One woman thought the Sequest was a
phallic. And you can't blame her. I can grab it for you. You'll see it's a giant penis.
No, don't grab that giant penis. Just leave it there.
Don't stand up.
I bet that's something you've never said in one of these interviews before.
No, I have not.
A lot we
Well, I
have
think
never
you
done.
probably did with Lee Child. People are always telling him, don't grab that giant penis.
Don't do it.
Don't reach for the reacher.
We had something similar though in the James Rawlins thing. He had some sort of fossil that
it was pretty close.
I forget my question now. Hold on. No. Lee, what's you walked past it. I saw you had a mini fridge in your office.
I do.
What's it stocked with other than Diet Coke?
That's a good question. Hello, ladies and gentlemen in TV land. Should we see what's in Lee's freezer? God, I hope there isn't a dildo or something in there.
Or a body part.
Oh, I hope there is. Just to show it.
Let's take a look, shall we? We've got Gatorade and Diet Coke. That's it.
Oh, that's disappointing. It's easy to show the freezer, though. That's where we.
This is so I have no excuse, to be honest with you, so I don't have an excuse to leave my office. Because if you go downstairs to get something to eat, you can end up staying down there watching.
It turns into an hour and a half. Yeah.
So by having refrigerator right here, actually, this tells them about the itinerant television writer life. When I am on a TV show, I have my own office. And the refrigerator is something I would bring to the office. It's just here between shows, really, for the most part. You see all the James Bond posters behind me.
Yeah.
This is the only room in the house I'm allowed to have them. And I have all the James Bond posters. But I'll bring them to my office on whatever TV show I'm doing.
Yeah.
So I have like an office kit that I kind of bring along. I have another office chair and other stuff. But the refrigerator's, again, so I have stuff when I'm there late at night. And
pretty smart.
Pretty cool. When you first started out, you wrote under the pen name Ian Ludlow so that you could be on the shelf next to Robert Ludlum.
Yeah.
But if your first book were to be published today, like your debut, which new or upcoming authors would you want to be on the shelf next to?
I think my name would be Marcus Cronelly. Or Lee Childress. Luke Childress. Yeah, Link Childress. Yeah, I would be that mercenary about it.
Good Irish name.
And so here's the last question. I was a huge fan of Sequest and Monk. So if Monk were to be assigned to the Sequest, what would be the first thing he did when he stepped on board that submarine?
Get rid of that goddamn dolphin. What's that mammal swimming around inside the Sequest?
But they could talk to it. Why would he get rid of that damn thing?
You have not lived until you've written dialogue for a talking dolphin. I remember with horror my experience writing dialogue for a dolphin. How the hell did my career come to this? There are no classes at UCLA on writing for mammals. I mean, I was writing that stuff, and I turned the script in, and I won't mention the name of the network executive because he now runs a network now. I got a note from him saying, read the new script. Darwin would never say what you have him say.
Darwin the dolphin.
You do realize that dolphins don't talk. And he went, don't give me that smart-ass Hollywood bullshit. You don't know what this dolphin has been through. He has loved and he has lost. He carries deep emotional scars from the Dravidian War. And the thing is, he was right. I wasn't treating Darwin as a character. I was treating him as the fucking dolphin I had to write for. So I wrote a new Darwin scenes with all of his Dolphinian angst.
Yeah.
The network executive said, these Darwin scenes are great. You were born to write this character. So then I got stuck writing all the Darwin scenes. So I made a vow that proves God exists. This didn't get in any of the newspapers, but I single-handedly proved the existence of God. I made a vow that I would never write for a dolphin again.
Okay.
3 weeks later, I was on The New Adventures of Flipper, starring Jennifer Jessica Alba.
Sense of humor that man
proved
has.
not only is it God, but he has a sense of humor.
Yeah.
But in case I needed more evidence, when I was on Hunter, it was a horrible experience. And I quit the show. And I told the executive producer that I was leaving, that it was awful, that I would rather write for Baywatch than do this crap. 7 days later, I'm doing Hill Street Blues on the sand. So yeah, God exists. God has a great time toying with the lives of writers.
Let us know next time you say never so I can invest in whatever project is coming up.
Well, Lee, you've survived the entire show now.
Woo! Apparently, my computer didn't.
That's true. It's true.
Put it out there.
We had a blast. We could honestly talk to you for 3 or 4 more hours.
Absolutely.
We probably could come up with questions all day. But we really appreciate you coming on the show. We wish you the best of luck with what is it? Deep Sea Sperm Bank? Is that the next book?
Underwater Sperm Bank. You haven't used
Underwater Sperm Bank.
You are missing out on one of the great pleasures of life, my friend.
No, we wish you luck in all your endeavors, and keep writing Ian Ludlow, and definitely keep writing Eve, because we're.
I intend to keep writing Eve as long as they'll keep giving me contracts.
Nice.
Cheers, brother.
Class.
Thank you.
I want to thank the great Lee Goldberg for coming on the show tonight to talk about his career in television and as a novelist. His Fake Truth is out right now, and Bone Canyon comes out this January. But pick up all his books because he's a hell of a writer. Guys, raise a glass to Lee Goldberg.
We shall.
And we do. Cheers.
Buy all his books. Chris?
Do it.
Do it.
Okay. Do it.
This is the outro for Lee Goldberg.
1 second.
And Sean Cameron is not ready.
I'm not.
Damn it. All right. Take number 1.5, since there was no take the first time around. Lee Goldberg and his outro. And it's Mo and Curly and Shemp off camera. And 3, 2, yeah.
His Fake Truth is out right now, and The Bone Canyon comes out this January. Pick up all his books. He's got a ton of them. And start watching his television shows. And I'm going to do that over because I don't care about it. I don't even know what television shows to say.
He doesn't have any television.
All of them.
shows right now.
Yeah.
I mean, they're reruns.
Yeah.
They're pretty good.
Nickelodeon.
Watch Murder, She Wrote. He didn't have anything to do with it, but it's a great show.
In 3, 2, yeah.
We want to thank the great Lee Goldberg for coming on today to talk about his...
Whoa, that was a handful coming out of that microphone. Oh, we've lost him. We've lost him, people.
I'm here.
Okay.
I was going to just overdub like later what I was supposed to say.
I was going to have that samurai voice on there for you.
I want to thank the great Lee Goldberg for coming on tonight, talk about his career in film and television, as well as a novelist. His book...
Transitions every time.
Damn it.
Apparently you spent a little time at Moe's Tavern today.
Hey, at least he had a couple bloopers to start off, so I'm not the only.
Here we go. 3, 2, yeah.
And he dives in the room and